Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to LittleAfrica BronxNews' Meet the Candidate interview series. We launched Meet the Candidate interviews to give our viewers and Bronxites an opportunity to get to know the candidates who are running to represent them. Our Meet the Candidate interview series covers races for City Council, as well as citywide races, Mayor, Public Advocate, and Comptroller. As some of you know, in District 15, we have a special election coming up on March 23rd. For voters in District 15, you can do early voting a week prior to the March 23rd election, as well as go online and order an absentee ballot. So there really is no reason not to vote. Today's guest is Mr. Oswald Feliz, who is a candidate for City Council in District 15, running to represent Bronxites in that district. Mr. Feliz is an attorney by profession, as well as a community advocate. Mr. Feliz, we are honored to have you today here with us at LittleAfrica BronxNews. Please tell us about yourself.
Yeah, the honor is mine. Thank you so much, Mona and LittleAfrica BronxNews for having me today. And also thank you for all of the great work that you do in making sure that voters in the Bronx know about the process, know about the elections and the candidates that are running and their policy proposals. Thank you. I'm Oswald Feliz. I am a candidate for City Council right here in the Bronx, District 15. I am a tenant lawyer. I've defended tenants at risk of eviction right here in the Bronx. And I've also represented tenants who are the ones suing their landlord due to landlord harassment. I'm also a college professor. I teach political science and writing at Hostos Community College right here in the Bronx, a school that has opened a lot of doors to many disadvantaged students in our borough. I'm a lifelong Bronxite. This is the only home that I've ever known. My family come from very humble beginnings. My mom was and is a home attendant. My father was a cab driver. They worked every single day of their lives to make sure that their children could have a stable home and could achieve their dreams. I'm running for City Council because I know our borough has a lot of challenges. We deserve a city and a Bronx that works for all of us, one where every family is able to move up the economic ladder, and one where every child in the Bronx is able to receive a quality education so that they can achieve their dreams. We live in the wealthiest city on earth, but we also, I also live, and many of my neighbors live in the poorest region in the nation. But we know that a better Bronx is possible, and the time to, improve our borough is not in 5 years or 5 months. The time is now, and that's why I'm running for City Council.
Well, thank you for that. So, Mr. Feliz, you have a special election on March 23rd. And then, of course, there will be the regular Democratic primary on June 22nd. But with this special election on March 23rd to replace former City Councilman Richie Torres, now Congressman Richie Torres, what this means is March 23rd, March 24th, the next day, you may be the new City Council member. So unlike most others running for City Council in the Democratic primaries, whoever wins this election on March 23rd starts work the next day. So you don't have, I guess I could put it this way, the luxury to talk about what you're going to do come January of 2022 to help Bronxites, to help your district residents recover from this COVID-19 pandemic, this devastation that's been wrought upon our community. So my question to you, Mr. Feliz, is March 24th, Councilmember Oswald Feliz, what is your top 3 priorities to help your district and the Bronx start to recover from this COVID-19 pandemic? What is your recovery plan? What are, say, your top 3 priorities? March 24th.
Yeah, our borough, we are currently living an unprecedented pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic, a pandemic that has affected our nation and our country and our planet. Um, but there were areas that were more affected than others, and the Bronx is a perfect example. The Bronx is home to many essential workers, people who are not privileged and are not able to work from home. Essential workers, taxi drivers like my father, bodega workers, home attendants like my mother, people that have to be in person um, when when going to work. And for that reason, our borough was affected more than any other section in our city. And on top of that, we people in the Bronx have jobs that were also directly hit by the coronavirus pandemic, including restaurant jobs. The city forced many restaurants to shut down for a long period, and then they closed indoor dining. And for that reason, many jobs were cut. And for that reason, many of our workers were laid off. So in other words, people in the Bronx were severely affected in so many ways, and also with very little notice, right? The coronavirus came and then we immediately shut down many of the businesses. So from one day to the other, people's lives changed dramatically. They lost their jobs and they were faced with economic insecurity. We have, if and when I get elected to the city council, I will work to, number one, make sure that there is a moratorium on evictions. Again, people there's a lot of economic insecurity in our borough due to reasons beyond the control of residents. And we have to make sure that no person loses their home due to that fact. We have to make sure that no one loses their home in the middle of a pandemic and due to reasons beyond their control. We have to make sure that we have a moratorium on evictions for the entire duration of the pandemic. That is the first thing. The second thing is on the COVID recovery is ensuring that we help people get back on their feet after the COVID pandemic. During the pandemic, many people have lost jobs. And even if we have a moratorium on evictions, the rent is still going to continue to accumulate. So even if you have a moratorium on evictions, they technically cannot evict you, the landlords. But a year later or 6 months later, after the end of the pandemic, people are going to have a lot of rent owed, a lot of rental arrears, and they will be at high risk of eviction, especially those workers who lost their jobs due to the pandemic. And if a tenant owes $12,000, $15,000 of rent, let's say a year of rent that has accumulated, it's almost impossible for low-income workers to quickly get back on their feet. And our city should step up, have their backs, and we have to expand rental assistance programs to do that by making sure that the city is able to help them pay all of the back rent so that they could quickly get back on their feet and get ready to move on with their lives post-COVID era. And last but not least, number 3 on the COVID recovery, we have to do better on our education. Privileged people have been back to school to in-person learning for months now. And they have all the resources they need to deal with COVID-related problems, including access to Wi-Fi, access to laptops, and etc. The same is not true for low-income residents of the Bronx. And we have to do better. We have to make sure that every child is able to receive a quality education, even in the middle of a pandemic. That should not be a luxury, and that should not be an opportunity only to wealthy, privileged people. We live in the wealthiest city on earth, and we have to make sure that that luxury reaches everybody in our city, especially those that live in the Bronx and are low-income disadvantaged people.
No, you're absolutely right about all 3 points. These are all urgent, critical matters that need to be addressed immediately, as in yesterday. So I'm going to start first with housing, and you're you're a tenant attorney. You fight for tenants, for renters, and you're accurate in stating that the arrears are piling up. Um, and families who right now are struggling are certainly not going to have that money. So, what type of program or grant assistance would you advocate for as city council member? Because yes, we do have the one-shot deal, but sometimes there are even obstacles to families getting the one-shot deal. Then for families, homeless families in shelters, you have the City FEPS program, but that program is also another mess because the amount for the vouchers, it's far below the amount that you would pay for an apartment, um, say for example in the Bronx, whether it's a studio or 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom. The FEPS voucher, the city FEPS voucher amount is way too little, and families are now stuck in shelters with that voucher. So my question to you is, given all of this, and in your role as a tenant advocate and attorney, what would you propose to get these families back on track? What type of program, grant program, assistance program would you structure?
Yeah, so the one-shot deal, I've been practicing tenant law for approximately 4 years now. And the one-shot deal program has helped so many families, vulnerable families, avoid eviction. It's a program that funded mostly by the city, has helped families avoid eviction. And the big problem is that we're facing an unprecedented um, problem, a pandemic, and also an economic problem. And as a result, if the Bronx received funds for, let's say, 100,000 one-shot deals per year, let's say, we might need that times, I don't know the numbers, but given the coronavirus pandemic, we might need that times maybe 20 or 30. So we have to make sure that our city is prioritizing the needs of the vulnerable, and we have to make sure that the city expands on these programs. Um, we're obviously going to need more funding than pre-pandemic, given that, again, we are in the middle of a bad economic situation. So we have to make sure that the city expands on the one-shot deal programs, and also make sure that they make it easier for families to apply and also receive these programs. In many cases, I help tenants at risk of eviction navigate the process. And I'm a tenant lawyer. I know the process very well, but I know many tenants would not be able to navigate that process by themselves. Many who are applying and going through that process for the first time. So we have to make it easier for families to go through that process and also get approved very quickly and without obstacles. And of course, that's going to require more funding by the city.
Yes.
Um, and the second thing is, yes, the city FEPS vouchers. Currently, city FEPS is like a Section 8 program, but funded by the city. And one program has helped a lot of families secure stable housing, but the program does have its minor problems that have to be tweaked. So for example, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but for a family of 3, the program would only pay a rent of, let's say, $1,700 per month. So that would be the rent cap, and that's just a random number that I'm throwing out there. And we know in New York City, with $1,700 for a family of three, you're going to have a very difficult time finding a home. So we have to make sure that we tweak the requirements and the rules, and we have to do advanced or enhanced city FEPS vouchers so that families do not face obstacles when looking for a home with that voucher. And the third thing on relating to the homeless crisis in our city, which we continue to, the current government continues to ignore, given that you could walk through any neighborhood and you will see a person without a home, which is not fair and not okay, especially in the wealthiest city on earth. On that problem, on the homeless problem, I think it's due to a lot of reasons, including affordable housing, jobs, but also a third thing that at least I don't hear that many people talking about is the income discrimination. As a housing lawyer, I represented many tenants who were previously at a homeless shelter, and they were able to get a City FEPS voucher, and then that helped them find a home and be able to afford a home. But we do have a problem where many people in shelters, many families in shelters have a City FEPS voucher, and they are able to afford many different apartments, and they apply for it and they qualify, and the landlord tells them that they cannot rent to them simply because of their source of income, given that the money, or AKA the money, is being paid by the city rather than the tenant, and the landlord says, I don't accept City FEPS, or I don't accept Section 8. And in New York City, discriminating against someone based on their income is flatly illegal. We need to do more. Our city needs to do more to enforce those income discrimination laws so that our homeless populations, families in homeless shelters could be able to find a stable home without obstacles.
Yeah, no, it definitely, they really need to address this income discrimination, because it's not just landlords, it's management companies, it's realtors. Once they hear someone has City FEPS, they're just like, no, we don't rent to them. And this is why we have so many families still stuck in the shelter system, even though they have that voucher. So continuing on with housing, I want to talk to you about NYCHA, which is just the worst landlord. And every year, every winter, throughout the winter, throughout the year, we hear horrible stories about what NYCHA tenants and families have to endure in the New York City Housing Authority, whether it's no heat and hot water, broken elevators, you name it, mold, mildew, dilapidated apartments. This is something that it's so common now. And many city council members, as well as state legislators, say the same thing. Oh, we're waiting on the federal government. The federal government needs to give us more money. But these tenants and these families are living in the New York City Housing Authority. So my question to you, Mr. Feliz, is, as a city councilman, how are you going to advocate and fight for the rights of these NYCHA families, these children in lead apartments, our senior citizens who are dying because the elevators are broken and they can't get downstairs, and there's no way for help to arrive in time? What are you going to do to help these families?
Yeah, what NYCHA residents are going through is not okay anywhere in the world, and especially in a very wealthy city like New York City. Seniors, disabled, living on a 25th floor, um, having to miss important life-saving doctor's appointments because they cannot go down the stairs with a wheelchair because they're disabled, and having only 2 elevators in a 25-story building, and both of them being out of service. That is not okay. Also, children, yeah, growing up with vermin, growing up with garbage in front of their building 10 feet high. That is not okay. That is not how we treat our vulnerable people. And our city, people in our city say that that's not okay, but then they don't take action that will truly help remedy that problem.
Yeah.
If I'm elected, and it's been like that for a long time, for a very long time, so we point a lot of fingers, but I think the fingers that we should point are the people that are there now in charge. If I am elected to the city council, NYCHA tenants will have a reliable advocate. I will work to resolve the the problems that NYCHA faces by doing a few things. The first thing is giving them access to lawyers. Um, the city funds lawyers for tenants, but only for those that rent in private apartments or semi-private apartments. So for example, if you have Section 8, a Section 8 voucher, and you rent a private apartment, you would have access to a lawyer. However, many of these lawyers are not able to take NYCHA cases.
Mhm.
My guess is that the city doesn't want to provide funding for people that are going to be suing the city. But
Mhm.
yeah, but if I'm elected to the city council, NYCHA residents are going to have a reliable ally. I will fight to secure funding so that NYCHA residents could have access to lawyers, and they could also, so that they could sue NYCHA in cases where NYCHA is violating their rights and the laws, housing laws. It is illegal to have an apartment with lead paint, especially for years. It's illegal to fail to correct vermin infestation, especially after being provided notice for years. It's also illegal to have 10 feet of garbage in front of the building, which is obviously going to cause additional problems, including rats, roaches, and etc. So I'll fight to bring funding so that NYCHA residents have access to lawyers to help them fight for their rights. Once you get the courts involved, our city will react and they will make it a top priority. They'll be forced to make it a top priority. It seems like they say it's a priority, but then the problems continue to exist. If if we get our courts involved, our city will have no other option but to make it a priority, and also to truly deliver to vulnerable families in NYCHA.
Okay. No, that is true, and something like that, giving NYCHA families access to legal services will go a long way. Um, so my final question with regards to NYCHA, what is your position on the RAD program?
Yeah, NYCHA is currently facing and continues to face economic challenges. However, those economic challenges are due to divestment. We need our city government to provide more funding. We also need to get the state and the federal government to provide additional funding as well. I am not convinced about the RAD program. Anything that involves privatizing or semi-privatizing public housing apartments, that's usually very suspect. And I think about, it might help, I think to myself, it might help for 5 years, but then in 5 years later, we might take it to another phase and then fully privatize the NYCHA complex and etc. So I am a bit concerned about it. I think there's other ways of bringing the necessary funding that we need, including by having our city, state and federal government step up and provide the funding that NYCHA desperately needs to resolve their economic challenges.
Okay. I want to talk now about education, and you touched on education a bit in your introduction. What is your opinion on how Mayor de Blasio and Chancellor Richard Carranza have handled managing the schools since they first shut down the schools in mid-March of last year, and then their reopening in September, or their delayed opening in September? I'd like your opinion on the work that they've done so far in preparing to resume school in September, as well as what's going on now with in-person learning and remote learning.
Yeah, that's been a big challenge for the city. Any region would find that very challenging, given that the coronavirus pandemic reached our city and we had to shut down and completely change our public school system from one day to the next. Any region would have found that challenging, especially given that you'll have to completely change the curriculum, one that allows for easier instruction via the internet, and etc.
Yeah.
However, we're almost 1 year into the pandemic, and there's absolutely no reason why we should still have the problem regarding problems with Wi-Fi and etc. Wi-Fi, lack of laptops, and etc. So a year later, that should not be a problem, and it continues to be a problem. And I think they haven't handled that very well.
So if you could grade them, what grade would you give them?
Let's see. Well, I would say they have tried their best, and we have possibly the biggest public school system in the country.
Yeah.
So just being, realistic, it's not as easy as it would be to get done, let's say in Massachusetts, which has a smaller public school system.
Yeah.
So I would say B minus, B. I'll give them a B. They've tried very hard, and I completely understand it's, we could critique, but managing a system, the biggest public school system in the nation, it's challenging. But I would give them B minus, maybe.
Okay. So New York City is the largest school, has the largest school district in the nation. It also has the largest school budget in the nation. The New York City Department of Education school budget is over $30 billion. And I always say with a B, billion dollars. And with this $30 billion budget, and I'm just going to start simply with the Bronx. The Bronx is always 62 when it comes to the proficiency rates of students. ELA, math, social studies, science. The Bronx has consistently and has a proven track record of having the students with the lowest proficiency rates. And this is not something that's just been the last year, the last 5 years, the last 10 years. This is something, this has been the case for many, many years. So my question to you is this, Mr. Feliz, how do you plan on holding the New York City Department of Education accountable for the educational outcomes of our children, not just in District 15, not just in the Bronx, but throughout the city? A supermajority of Black and Latino students do not read, write, or do math at grade level. In New York City, we are graduating students who are illiterate, who are illiterate, and you are a hostess professor, you understand this. When they take that entrance exam for CUNY, the majority of New York City public school students have to take remedial courses. And this delays them even further when it comes to completing their college degrees. And it also puts them in debt because they have to pay for those remedial courses.
Yes.
So my question to you is, how are you as councilman going to hold the Department of Education finally accountable for the education outcomes of our children, considering they have a $30 billion plus budget?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I went to local public schools. My entire family did as well. And when we made it to college, none of us were prepared for college. We actually, let me see, actually all of us ended up going to Bronx Community College. And we had to take exactly that. We had to take remedial courses, which is basically high school level courses at the college level. And we have to build a Bronx where when people graduate from high school, they are prepared, their level, their reading, writing, math is at, let's say, a sophomore college level. That we have to make sure they're graduating with advanced reading, writing, and math skills, rather than graduating from 12th grade and they graduate with, 11th or 10th grade skills like myself when I graduated from Walton High School. It's very unfair. And unfortunately, also, I used to teach at Bronx Community College as well. When I taught there, the average student at Bronx Community College graduated from Bronx Community College and got a 2-year degree. It took them 7 years to obtain a 2-year degree. That's how behind they were. They would be forced to take, remedial reading, and even if they took the courses and they didn't pass what we used to call the ACT, the ACT exam, they would have to take that remedial again, and they would not be able to take college level, let's say, writing courses until they actually passed that reading ACT. And for that reason, I used to teach there. I saw students who were stuck at a community college for years. And again, people who it took 7 years to get a 2-year degree. So we cannot continue to leave any generation behind. We have to create a school system where every student is able to achieve their dreams. If they want to become a doctor, a lawyer, psychologist, they're able to achieve it without obstacles. And what I'll do, and that'll actually be a top priority, if I'm elected to the city council, I'll fight to bring opportunity to the Bronx. That'll be my #1 priority. I will work to change the way that our school system is financed. A lot of it has to do with funding.
Yeah.
Currently, our city spends about $22,000 per student, regardless of what school they are attending. So basically, if you grew up in a privileged household and you attend one of the most privileged schools, that the city would spend $22,000 per student at that school. If you grow up in a struggling neighborhood and you attend a school that is serving many struggling students, whether it is people who are navigating the school process for the first time, or people who are, let's say, learning a new language and therefore kind of facing some obstacles, the city would spend the same money for that school that serves those struggling students. If I'm elected, I will work tirelessly, and I'll get it done, by the way. I'll work so that our city provides a minimum of 30 to 40% additional funding to schools that serve struggling students. That way, these schools will able to have, let's say, smaller classrooms. Every student will be able to raise their hands and get their question answered. And every student will be able to receive the attention they deserve and they need. I mean, just imagine, I went to Walton High School, and at least in that school, we had, when I was there, a large amount of students who were learning English as a second language. So just imagine being a teacher and teaching math, a very complicated topic. And you're teaching math to students. Number one, already the topic is complicated. But on top of that, your students struggle or are learning English again as a second language. Just imagine how difficult it must be to that teacher and also the students as well. And also, just imagine 30 students who are struggling and have their hands raised, right? It's going to be very difficult for a teacher to give every student the attention they need. And if they do give those students the attention and they're able to take every question, then that means that other topics that are on the agenda, the teacher might not be able to get to those topics, given that they are stuck on, topic number 2 and et cetera. So, more equitable, more funding. We actually have one of the most unfair public school funding systems in the country. We rated, I think last year, we were rated number 49 out of 50 in terms of how fair our school funding system is. That is not okay in a city that has the most diverse public school system in the country, racially and economically diverse. And it's also not okay in a city that, says that it's very fair and also a city that is very wealthy and has the funds to make sure that every student is able to get a quality education. And also on the public school system topic, we also have the most racially and economically segregated public school system in the country. That is also very problematic. The courts said it 60 years ago, that separate but equal or segregated schools are never equal. 60 years later, our schools are more segregated than ever. And the time to change that is now. We don't need a 5-year plan for that, or a 3-year plan, or we don't need to let, like our the city government is currently doing, let parents decide. We need to decide that. We've already decided that segregation is not okay. So we need to desegregate them, and we need to segregate them now, quickly now, not 5 years or 10 years. We need it now.
Okay, I have a final education question for you. Mayoral control will be up for renewal again. I think it's next year. And granted, it's the state legislature that decides whether or not we're going to renew mayoral control. But what is your position on mayoral control?
On the issue of public education and just community needs, anytime that I walk the Bronx, or actually even as a tenant lawyer, I noticed that every single neighborhood in the Bronx has different needs. Mm-hmm. So applying that to our public education question, we have to give localities or parents and teachers the power to make policy. We shouldn't just implement one big system and put it on our entire public education system in privileged neighborhoods and underprivileged neighborhoods, and et cetera. We need to give more power to local people so that they could have, let's say, a curriculum and spend the funds in the way that they think is best, considering the many issues or priorities of that school and region. One school might have students that are navigating the school system for the first time. They're struggling due to that. Another region might have, again, English as a second language thing. So therefore, that school might want to restructure their curriculum to make sure that these students are able to move fairly quickly. So we should give power to localities so that they could construct policy that will help that region.
So are you saying that you are for going back towards local community school board control versus mayoral control?
That is correct, yeah. Community control, I think, would be in the best interests of every child.
Okay. All right. So now I want to talk about small business and economic development. Your district, if I'm not mistaken, covers not just Fordham Road, but also White Plains Road, which are two major retail districts um, in the Bronx. And not too long ago, there was an article in the New York Times which said that only 2% of Bronx businesses received PPP assistance from the federal government, as well as other types of financial assistance from the city. 2%. And as you know, it's small businesses that drive the economy. It's small businesses that drive the US economy. It's small businesses that drive the local economy. The people who work on White Plains Road, the people who work on Fordham Road, the people who work in our small businesses come from the community. They're our neighbors. And these small businesses got zero help from the agencies that were supposed to support them and help them get that funding. So whether it's the Bronx Overall Economic Development Corporation or the Bronx Chamber of Commerce, whoever it is, the fact of the matter that only 2% of Bronx businesses received support and assistance speaks volumes. And these businesses are struggling. They didn't have the type of support to deal with the bureaucracy in completing all of these applications and putting together their paperwork. And because of that, our community members, our neighbors, many of them lost their jobs because these small businesses closed. And many of these small businesses that are still open are still struggling. So my question to you is this: what are you going to do come March 24th, if elected as councilman, to help these small businesses?
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's been a lot of COVID recovery programs,
Mhm.
and that recovery is not reaching everyone in our city, and especially in the Bronx. It's especially not reaching low-income people or small businesses.
Mhm.
If I'm elected to the city council, I will fight. And again, small businesses are our community. They make our community great.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
they hire local people, and as a result, those local residents are able to put food on the table, are able to pay rent, and are able to provide a life that is financially stable for their families. So we need to have their backs. Having the backs of small businesses is the same as having the backs of our community. The small businesses are part of our community.
Mhm.
If I'm elected to the city council, I'll implement a similar program, a program very similar to the ones designed to help local tenants. I will pass legislation or provide funding so that local small business owners could have access to a program similar to a one-shot deal, where it would not be a loan, right? If a
Yes.
business is shut down for a year or
Thank
two,
you.
or one
Yes.
and a half, mhm.
Mhm.
If they're shut down for 1.5 years and they owe, and commercial rent is extremely high. So in a year, a business could owe up to $100,000 in rent. I mean, I was looking for a campaign office and everybody was asking for $8,000 a month. I said, whoa, when am I going to get? So just imagine being liable for $8,000 a month in rent, but also having a business shutdown where you cannot bring in any money. You have to shut down your business. In a year, you could easily owe $100,000, and providing these businesses a loan so that they could pay that back rent, that is nowhere near enough. Many of these businesses are barely surviving, and just giving them an additional bill of $100,000, that does not come close to remedying the problem. We have to make sure that our government is providing them with funds to, in some cases, even fully pay the back rent, so that when the pandemic is over, they can get back on their feet in a stable way, right? Not only get back on their feet, but be very stable when they get up, and they're able to get back to business and hire local people and continue to make our communities great and vibrant.
Yes. No, the small businesses need support. Helping them, it helps the community in a great way, because we need our community members working. We need them employed. And one thing that I see is when I look at different council members, as well as state legislators, staff lists, their staff directories, I always see community liaison. I think it's about time every one of them have a small business liaison as well, because we need that. And our small businesses need as much support as they can get. So perhaps that's something for you and others to consider as well. So I want to ask you to close a final question. You've seen the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine, and as you stated, and as we know, the Bronx is pretty much ground zero when it comes to essential workers and when it comes to the impact of this pandemic. But we now have the vaccine, but we hear stories of Bronxites not being able to get the vaccine or get an appointment for a vaccine. We hear stories of folks, senior citizens in Washington Heights, who cannot get a vaccine, but people from Westchester are coming down and they're getting the vaccine. So as city councilmen, let's say come March 24th, what are you going to do to ensure that your constituents in District 15, as well as Bronxites, our essential workers, our senior citizens, our community members, all of those who are in the high-risk categories, get this vaccine? What would you push for when it comes to ensuring the safety of the people in your district, our most vulnerable community members?
Yeah, the coronavirus pandemic, the Bronx was, ground zero. We were the most, by far, we were affected in every single way, more than every other region in the city. That is not fair. And we were also one of the last ones to gain real access to the vaccination. Due to a lot of reasons, I think the city, even though they had some vaccination sites that some Bronxites had access to, they didn't do a good job at actually doing outreach to our communities and kind of building confidence, the same outreach that they did to other regions. And for that reason, many people were hesitating to take the vaccination. So our city should have done and must do more to build confidence on the vaccination. My mom, by the way, was the first one who said, "Oswald, don't take the vaccine." Not that I would have qualified, right? Because but yeah, we have to do more to build trust in the vaccine, at least in the Bronx.
Yes.
Yeah, the second problem, which kind of should have been my first point, is that the Bronx was the borough that was affected the most by the coronavirus pandemic, due to the fact that we are home to many essential workers.
Yes.
We have to make sure, yeah, and we're also at higher risk. People in some neighborhoods of the Bronx, 20% of the people suffer from asthma.
Yes.
People suffer from asthma, and as a result, when they come across viruses like those that affect your breathing system, they
Mhm.
become at much higher risk than other people that live in other regions who are not exposed to high levels of air pollution causing asthma. Um, if I'm elected, I will fight so that I know currently the city is prioritizing on the vaccinations people that are 65 years or older, and etc. In the Bronx, I think the city should. I will fight so that we the standards for qualifying for the vaccination become a little bit more lenient, only considering the realities, including that reality, the fact that in the Bronx we have a high asthma rate. If people come across the coronavirus, they will be at much, much, much higher risk than people from other regions. Um, so asthma, also we are essential workers. Um, yeah, so we need greater access. And the facts are before us. The Bronx continues to be the borough that is the most affected by the coronavirus. So given that fact, the city should do more to implement a plan laser focused on helping the vulnerable. And the facts show that the Bronx is very, very vulnerable. Um, and we should of course prioritize the individuals 65 years or older, but we also have another problem that if a younger person catches the coronavirus and they go back home, they could transmit it to older
Yes.
individuals.
Mhm.
Given that the borough of the Bronx is a much is a at-risk population of the coronavirus or higher risk region, we should do more to make sure that the vaccination reaches more people in the Bronx so that we could all be safe. Again, a 25-year-old could easily catch the coronavirus, um, innocently come home, and then transmit it to someone else in their household much older. So we have to do more to protect everybody vulnerable.
Okay. So, Mr. Feliz, what are your closing remarks for your voters, for your constituents in District 15 who are going to the polls in the next 3 weeks, starting with early voting?
Yeah, Oswald Feliz. I'm humbly asking for your vote so that I can fight to build a better Bronx for all of us, one that works for all of us. A better Bronx is possible. I've spent my entire life building that better Bronx, first as a lawyer, fighting against evictions of people of the Bronx, and also representing our tenants who were harassed by landlords. I've also fought to build that better Bronx as a college professor at Hostels Community College, um, teaching disadvantaged students of the Bronx. Um, we can build a better Bronx. We could build a Bronx where every child is able to receive a quality education, a Bronx where every child is able to realize their dreams, whether it's being a doctor, lawyer, psychologist, even president of the United States. We could build that Bronx. I'm running for city council to build that Bronx. I want to make sure that opportunity reaches everyone in our city, regardless of their race, income, zip code. We can build that better Bronx. It's why I'm running for city council. And if I'm elected, I will deliver for the people of the Bronx and I will make sure that the best days of the Bronx are ahead. So I humbly ask for your vote. Again, I'm Oswald Feliz. Vote on March 23rd. And thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for joining us. Thank you so much, Mona, and the Little Africa Bronx News for having me. And yeah, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Feliz, for joining us today. All eyes are on this March 23rd election. District 15 folks, please come out, do early voting, get your absentee ballot, or vote on election day, March 23rd. Come out and vote, get your plan together, how you're gonna vote, bring a family member, a friend along with you, because this is a very, very important election. So let's prepare. Let's make sure that everyone is informed about the candidates running. At the end of this video, we will have a slide with Mr. Feliz's website, as well as his social media handles, where you can follow him, follow his campaign, learn even more about his policies and his background. But again, March 23rd, District 15 folks, please get out and vote. And Mr. Feliz, thank you so very much for joining us here at Little Africa Bronx News. And we will be watching your campaign and this election closely. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.